So, why do our eyes sometimes just flat out refuse to work as a team? Think about this for a second. Around 2% of children experience a condition where their eyes simply won't align. It's an ailment that has quite literally shaped how historical figures presented themselves to the world. Take the Irish historical figure Patrick Pearse, for example. He almost always insisted on being photographed in a side profile just to hide his eye misalignment. So yeah, it's a deeply physical condition, but as you'll see, it carries a profoundly human element too.
Welcome to The Explainer. Today, we're demystifying strabismus. We are going to peel back the layers of this really fascinating condition, looking at the mechanics, the mind, and the management. Let's get right into it. Here is our quick roadmap for today. First, we're decoding the misaligned eye. Second, causes and nerve classifications. Third, the hidden psychosocial toll. Fourth, diagnosing the condition. Fifth, pathways to treatment. And finally, a quick look at strabismus in other animals. Okay, let's dive into this first part, decoding the misaligned eye. What exactly is strabismus?
We hear everyday conversational terms like cross-eyed or lazy eye all the time, right? But let's define exactly what's happening when you notice a wandering gaze. At its core, strabismus is an eye disorder where the eyes just don't properly align with each other when looking at an object. The eye that is actually pointing at the target can even alternate back and forth. Interestingly, this misalignment can be constant, or it can be something that only happens occasionally. Now, if this isn't treated early on in childhood, the brain might try to adapt to the resulting double vision by, well, simply ignoring the visual input from the misaligned eye. And over time, that prolonged suppression can actually lead to permanent vision loss, which is known clinically as amblyopia.
So there are four main directional types of misalignment that can happen in the human eye. We have esotropia, where the eyes cross inward toward the nose. Then there's exotropia, where the eyes diverge outward. Sometimes people call this being wall-eyed. Hypertropia is where the eyes are misaligned upward, and hypotropia is when they drift downward. It's a highly precise classification system that's based entirely on the direction the eye wanders.
Section 2, Causes and Nerve Classifications, the brain-eye connection. Now, the root cause of this condition often lies in the extraocular muscles, the visual cortex, or the specific cranial nerves that drive those muscles. It's all about the wiring. If we look closely at the mechanics of nerve palsies, an impairment to cranial nerve 3, that's the oculomotor nerve, causes the associated eye to deviate down and out. Impairment to cranial nerve 4, the trochlear nerve, causes the eye to drift up and slightly inward. And a sixth nerve palsy, involving the abducens nerve, causes the eye to pull inward. It's this very direct mechanical relationship where nerve damage precisely dictates the physical posture of the eye itself. But beyond just the direction, the timing of the misalignment is absolutely fascinating. Manifest strabismus, which uses the suffix tropia, is present while a person is actively viewing a target binocularly. That means both eyes are open and actively trying to fuse an image. Latent strabismus, on the other hand, using the suffix phoria, only pops up after binocular vision is interrupted. I want you to think about how our eyes naturally want to relax. If a doctor covers one of your eyes, completely disrupting your visual positioning system, that covered eye might just relax into a slightly divergent posture. And that is a latent deviation. Section 3, the hidden psychosocial toll, beyond the physical. You know, the clinical anatomy is really only half the story. The human impact is profound, and for a lot of people, it's deeply emotional. So the crucial point here is this. One comprehensive study reported that a staggering 85% of adults with strabismus stated they had problems with work, school, and sports strictly because of their condition. On top of that, 70% said it had a significantly negative effect on their self-image. Visible strabismus can trigger negative social bias, heavily affecting employability, self-esteem, and basic communication. Picture this. You are navigating a high-stakes job interview. Normal eye contact is a foundational part of how we interact as humans, right? Because strabismus interferes with that shared gaze, it can unfortunately trigger unfair social biases from the interviewer and cause intense feelings of embarrassment, anger, or awkwardness for the applicant. The source material even points out that children with an outward turn, exotropia, were found to be more likely to develop mental health disorders than normal-sighted children. The emotional weight of this is just tremendous. To manage these psychosocial hurdles, adults usually employ 3 primary coping strategies. First is avoidance, which simply means refraining from participating in an activity altogether. Next is distraction, which is finding ways to deflect attention away from the condition. And finally, adjustment, approaching an activity differently to sort of accommodate for the misalignment. Researchers suggest that providing psychosocial support, like specific interpersonal skills training, could be an absolute game changer for individuals relying on these strategies. All right, Section 4, Diagnosing the Condition, Finding the Misalignment. So how do eye care professionals actually pinpoint and measure these deviances when a patient walks in? Well, diagnosis uses tools like cover testing, but a particularly elegant method is the Hirschberg reflex test. This test is beautifully simple but highly effective. Doctors basically shine a light into the patient's eyes and just observe the reflection. They're looking to see if that little point of light is perfectly centered on the pupil. If the reflection is off-center, they can instantly spot and measure the severity of the misalignment. We also see retinal birefringent scanning being used today as a modern screening tool to catch this nice and early in young kids.
Section 5, Pathways to Treatment, Realigning the Vision.
Once a diagnosis is made, the overarching medical goal is vital to keep in mind: achieving comfortable, single, clear, normal binocular vision at all distances. And this requires a pretty progressive journey of management. Step 1 is often glasses and prisms. Glasses help by changing the person's reaction to focusing, while prisms actually alter the way light strikes the eye, which effectively simulates a proper alignment. Step 2 involves botulinum toxin. Yes, Botox injections. Approved for this use way back in 1989, it's injected directly into the stronger eye muscle to temporarily paralyze it, which lets the pulling forces balance out. Finally, step 3 is surgery. Surgeons will actually go in and shorten, lengthen, or change the position of the extraocular muscles. They can even use adjustable sutures in the early postoperative period to literally manually refine the eye alignment. Pretty incredible stuff. Let's switch gears for Section 6. Strabismus in other animals, a curious connection. Let's lighten the mood slightly, because as it turns out, this curious condition isn't strictly a human phenomenon. You might find this fact surprising, but Siamese cats and related breeds are highly prone to having crossed eyes. Research actually indicates this is a behavioral compensation for developmental abnormalities in how nerves are routed in their optic chiasm. Even certain dog breeds, like the Shar-Pei, are genetically predisposed to strabismus because of imbalanced muscle tone around the eye. It really goes to show just how complex, delicate, and interconnected the visual system is across completely different species. All of this brings us to a final provocative question to leave you with today. How does our perception of eye contact truly shape our human connections? We've peeled back the layers on the anatomical mechanics, the treatments, and the incredibly heavy emotional toll of this condition. It's a powerful reminder of just how much we rely on a shared, aligned gaze to understand one another in society. I really hope this explainer gave you a fresh perspective on something we so often take for granted. Thank you so much for joining me, and keep exploring.